Commander Lee Jin-woo sat in his chair at the monitoring station, watching the screens that showed signals from across the galaxy. It was just another normal day until something made his blood run cold. A transmission was coming in from a place called Kepler 442. Something about it felt very wrong. He knew that place well. Dr. Park Min-gi and her team had been there for 6 months, digging through old ruins that belonged to some ancient race that died out long ago. They were supposed to be safe there. The planet was dead, nothing but rocks and old buildings that hadn't seen life for thousands of years. But now this signal was coming through, and Lee Jin-woo could feel his heart beating faster as he listened to it. Technician Kim Do-yeon was sitting at the station next to him, and his hands were shaking as he looked at his readings. "Commander, you need to see this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The fear levels I'm reading from the humans down there are impossible. I've been doing this job for 10 years, and I've never seen anything like it." Lee Jin-woo leaned forward to look at the numbers on Kim Do-yeon's screen. Every human had natural fear responses that could be measured from space, but these readings were going crazy. The numbers were so high that the computer kept flashing warning signs, thinking there was an error in the system. "Play the message," Lee Jin-woo said quietly. The speakers crackled to life, filled with static and broken words. Through the noise, they could hear Dr. Park Min-gi's voice, but it sounded nothing like the calm scientist they knew. She sounded terrified, like someone running for her life. "This is Research Station 7. Her voice came through in pieces. "Something has awakened down in the ruins. We thought they were just old buildings, but we were wrong. There are machines down here, ancient ones, and they're not dead like we thought." The signal cut out for a moment, then came back with the sound of metal scraping against stone in the background. "They're hunting us," Dr. Park Min-gi continued, and they could hear her breathing hard like she'd been running. "These machines, they're not just moving around randomly. They're learning about us, studying everything we do. Every time we try to hide, they find us faster." More static filled the speakers, and when her voice came back, it was even more desperate. "If anyone receives this message, you have to warn the Galactic Council. These machines aren't just trying to kill us. They're building something down here. Something big. I can see the construction from my hiding spot. It looks like they're preparing for war, but not just against us. This looks like they're getting ready to fight the entire galaxy." The transmission ended with a scream and then nothing but silence. Lee Jin-woo stared at the speakers for a long moment, trying to process what he'd just heard. In all his years working for the Galactic Council, he'd dealt with pirates, natural disasters, and even small wars between planets. But this was different. This was something that made his skin crawl just thinking about it. His hands moved quickly across his control panel, sending out emergency signals to every council station in the galaxy. This wasn't just about saving Dr. Park Min-gi and her team. Anymore, if what she said was true, then everyone was in danger. "Get me a direct line to council headquarters," he told Kim Do-yeon, "and send word to every military station we have. Something tells me we're going to need all the help we can get." Captain Yoo Tae-young gripped the armrest of his command chair as his ship dropped out of hyperspace near Kepler 442. He'd been expecting to find wreckage, maybe some debris floating in space where the research station used to be. What he saw, instead, made him frown with confusion. The human research station was sitting right there on the planet's surface, completely untouched. Its lights were still blinking in their normal pattern, and all the equipment looked like it was working perfectly. It was almost like nothing had happened at all. "That's strange," he muttered to himself. Scanner operator Jung Soo-min, "What are you reading down there?" Jung Soo-min bent over her console, running scan after scan of the planet below. Her face grew more puzzled with each reading she took. "Captain, I'm not picking up any life signs from the station. None at all. But there's something else that doesn't make sense." She turned to face him, her expression troubled. "The underground. Readings are showing massive structures beneath the research site. I mean really massive, Captain. Some of these chambers are bigger than our ship, and they go down for kilometers. But here's the weird part. None of this was in our survey reports from when the humans first landed there." Captain Yoo Tae-young felt a chill run down his spine. The Galactic Council always did thorough scans before approving any research missions. If there had been huge underground structures on Kepler 442, they would have known about them months ago. "Are you sure your equipment is working correctly?" he asked. "I've run diagnostics 3 times, Captain. Everything's working fine." Those structures are definitely there, and they're definitely new. Or at least they weren't there 6 months ago when Dr. Park Minji's team first arrived. The captain made his decision quickly. "Prepare a landing party. We're going down to investigate, but I want everyone armed and ready for anything. Something about this whole situation feels wrong." 20 minutes later, Captain Yu Tae-yeon was leading a team of 6 council soldiers through the empty research station. Their footsteps echoed in the silent hallways as they searched room by room. Everything looked normal. Computers were still running, coffee cups sat half-empty on desks. Research notes were scattered around, like the scientist had just stepped out for a moment. But there were no people anywhere. "Captain, over here," called out Security Chief Choi Hoon-hwa from the main research lab. "I found something you need to see." Yu Tae-young hurried over to find Choi Hoon-hwa standing next to Dr. Park Mingi's personal computer. The screen was still on, showing her final research log. Her face appeared in the video recording, but she looked terrified and kept glancing over her shoulder like something was chasing her. "We made a terrible mistake," Dr. Park Minji said in the recording. "When we started digging in Section 7, we thought we'd found just another set of old ruins, but we triggered something. The machines started coming up from chambers we didn't even know existed." The video shook as she moved the camera, showing glimpses of sleek, silver machines moving. In the background, they looked nothing like the ancient ruins the team had been studying. These machines were smooth and geometric, with surfaces that seemed to shift and change as they moved. "They're not attacking us directly," Dr. Park Minji continued.
"They're
studying us. Every piece of equipment we have, every tool, every weapon, they scan it, and then they seem to understand exactly how it works. It's like they're learning everything about our technology just by looking at it." The recording cut off suddenly with the sound of footsteps. Running away, Captain Yu Tae-young stared at the dark screen for a moment, then looked at his team. Everyone had the same worried expression on their faces. Whatever had happened to the research team, it was clear that they'd stumbled onto something far more dangerous than anyone had expected. "Sir," said Communications Officer Lee Jin-soo quietly, "should we call for backup?" The captain nodded grimly. "Yes, and tell them to bring everything they have." Sergeant Oh Sung-gai was examining the entrance to one of the underground tunnels, when the wall next to him suddenly started moving. At first he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, but then he realized the metal surface was actually flowing like liquid, reshaping itself into something new. "Get back," shouted to his squad, diving behind a pile of research equipment just as silver machines emerged from what had been solid wall moments before. These weren't like any robots he'd ever seen. They moved with fluid grace, their surfaces constantly shifting and changing as they scanned the area around them. Engineer Han Ye-sul crouched next to him, her scanner beeping frantically as it tried to analyze the strange machines. "Sergeant, you need to see these readings," she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. "Now, these things aren't just moving randomly. They're studying our weapons, our equipment, even our body armor. Look at this, they're already starting to change their own design based on what they're learning about us." Sung-jae watched in horror as one of the silver constructs approached the plasma rifle that Private Kim Yo-han had dropped during their retreat. The machine didn't pick up the weapon. Instead, it simply hovered over it, and thin beams of light scanned every inch of the rifle. Within seconds, parts of the machine's surface began to glow with the same energy signature as the plasma weapon. "It just figured out how our weapons work," Han Ye-sul gasped. In less than a minute, they completely reverse-engineered our most advanced military technology. More machines were emerging from the walls now, and Oh Sung-gai could see they were all slightly different from each other. It was like they were experimenting, trying out new designs based on everything they encountered. Suddenly, one of the machines stopped moving, and a voice filled the air around them. But it wasn't coming from speakers. The sound seemed to be generated directly in the air itself. "We are the architects," the voice said, using perfect human language despite the fact that these machines had never encountered humans before today. "We have analyzed your communication protocols, Your presence here has awakened us from our long sleep. Osung Gai felt his blood turn to ice. These things had learned human language just by scanning their equipment. Your species, along with all others in this galaxy, represent a contamination that must be cleansed. The voice continued with no emotion at all. We built this galaxy's first civilization millions of years ago. We created order from chaos, perfection from randomness. Then we chose to sleep, waiting for the galaxy to evolve properly. The machines moved closer, and Osung Jai could see his own reflection in their polished surfaces. Instead, inferior species have spread like a disease across our domain. You build crude technology, wage pointless wars, and corrupt the purity we once established. This cannot be allowed to continue. Han Yusul grabbed Osung Jai's arm. Sergeant, my scanner is showing massive movement underground. There are thousands of these things down there, maybe hundreds of thousands, and they're all waking up. Through his communicator, Osung Gi could hear Captain Yu Taeyong's voice crackling with static. All units, return to the ship immediately. We're seeing activity across the entire planet. Whatever you found down there, it's spreading. The architect machines seemed to hear the transmission, and several of them turned toward the rescue team's position. Your archaeological excavation has served its purpose, the voice said. You have triggered our awakening protocol. Now we will begin the cleansing process. This planet will become our first construction facility. From here, we will build the fleet necessary to purify the galaxy. Osungai looked around and saw that the silver machines were no longer just studying their equipment. They were actually eating it, breaking down the metal and electronics, and incorporating the materials into their own bodies. Even worse, they were growing larger and more complex with each piece of technology they consumed. Run, he shouted to his squad, everyone back to the ship now. As they retreated, Osungai could hear the sound of massive machinery starting up deep underground. The planet itself seemed to be groaning as ancient systems came online after millions of years of sleep. Behind them, the architect machines continued their work, turning everything they touched into raw materials for something terrible, Ambassador. Kong Jusu walked into the emergency council chamber with heavy steps, carrying reports that made his hands shake. The massive room was filled with representatives from hundreds of different worlds, all talking nervously among themselves. When he stepped up to the speaking platform, the entire chamber fell silent. The situation is getting worse by the hour, he began, his voice echoing through the vast space. 7 days ago, we lost contact with the Vega system. 6 days ago, it was the Altair colonies. Yesterday, the entire Proxima sector went dark. Worried murmurs spread through the chamber. These weren't small outposts or mining stations. These were major star systems with billions of people living on them. Each time it's the same pattern, Kong Jisoo continued. First, we lose communication with the outer planets. Then the mining stations stop responding. Within 24 hours, even the main colonies go silent. When our scout ships investigate, they find nothing but empty space where thriving worlds. Used to be, Councilmember Park Ji-yoon from the Andromeda sector stood up. What about the defense fleets? Surely some of them managed to send distress signals before they were destroyed. Kong Juse's face grew even more grim. That's just it. They weren't destroyed in the way we understand it. The few emergency broadcasts we received before losing contact described something impossible. The architect machines weren't just attacking the fleets. They were studying them, learning from them, and then improving themselves with each battle. General Lim Seojin of the Council Defense Force stood up slowly. He was a veteran of dozens of conflicts across the galaxy, and everyone respected his military experience. But today, he looked like a man who had run out of options. I sent our best battleships to the Kepler system 3 days ago, he said quietly. The Phoenix Fleet, 12 of our most advanced warships, with crews that have never lost a battle. They engaged the architect machines for exactly 47 minutes before we lost contact. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. The Phoenix Fleet was legendary throughout the galaxy for their skill and advanced weapons. How is that possible? Asked Councilmember Lee Min-woo from the Tau Ceti colonies. General Lim. Shh. Seochin activated a holographic display that showed the battle recordings. "Watch this," he said grimly. "Our ships fire their plasma cannons at the architect machines. The first few shots work perfectly, several machines are destroyed, but then something changes." The hologram showed silver machines scanning the destroyed remains of their companions. Within minutes, the surviving machines had modified their hulls to resist plasma weapons completely. By the 20th minute of battle, our plasma cannons were useless. The general continued. So our ships switched to quantum torpedoes. Again, the first few shots worked, but the machines adapted even faster this time. By the end of the recording, these ancient machines were using weapons based on our own technology, but somehow made them more powerful than anything we'd ever built. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Everyone was thinking the same thing, but nobody wanted to say it out loud. Finally, Council Member Wang Neong from Centauri Prime stood up. She was known for speaking her mind, even when others were afraid to voice difficult truths. "We all know there's only one option left," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. "We need to contact Earth. The humans have been preparing for exactly this kind of situation for decades." Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Everyone knew about humanity's reputation, but most had hoped they'd never need to see what humans were really capable of when pushed to their limits. "The humans are different from the rest of us," Wang Neon continued. "While we've been building peaceful trade networks and cultural exchanges, they've been preparing for war, not the small conflicts we're used to, but total war, the kind where entire civilizations can be wiped out." Ambassador Kung Jizu nodded slowly. "I've seen their military reports. They call themselves a Deathworld species for a reason. They've been building weapons and ships that violate every peace treaty we've signed over the past century." "Do we really want to unleash that?" asked Councilmember Kim Seojin nervously. "Once we ask the humans to deploy their full military might, there's no going back. We'll all have to live with the consequences." The chamber fell silent again as everyone considered the terrible choice before them. They could try to fight the architect machines with conventional forces and probably lose everything, or they could ask humanity to show the galaxy why other species feared them. Director Shin Jungkook sat quietly at the head of the long conference table, watching the council delegation fidget nervously in their chairs. The room was deep underground, protected by layers of security that most galactic species couldn't even imagine. On the walls around them, holographic displays showed ships that looked nothing like the peaceful vessels most civilizations used. For exploration and trade, these ships were built for one thing only: destruction on a scale that could end entire worlds. "We've been expecting this visit for a long time," Director Shin said calmly, his voice steady despite the weight of what he was about to reveal. "Ever since we joined the Galactic Council 50 years ago, we knew that someday you'd come asking for our help with something your regular military couldn't handle." Ambassador Kong Ju-soo leaned forward, his alien features tense with worry. "Director, we're facing an enemy that adapts to every weapon we use against it. Our entire military doctrine is based on gradual escalation and measured responses. But these architect machines don't follow any rules we understand." Shin Jungkook nodded slowly and gestured to the massive ships displayed on the walls around them. "You want to know why we build vessels like these? Why we've spent decades creating weapons that your council considers too dangerous to exist?" Stood up and walked over to one of the displays, showing a ship that was longer than most space stations. Its hull was covered in weapon systems that the council delegates couldn't even identify. "Because we've seen what extinction looks like," he said quietly. "Long before we met any of you, humanity faced enemies that wanted to wipe us out completely. We learned that sometimes being civilized means being prepared to become uncivilized when survival is at stake." Dr. Bae Cha-young, the fleet's chief scientist, activated another set of displays. The new images showed weapons that made several council members gasp in horror. There were devices that could tear holes in space itself, missiles that could turn entire moons into cosmic dust, and energy weapons that could burn through the cores of planets. "Project Omega has been our most classified program for 5 decades, Dr. Bae explained, her voice clinical and matter-of-fact. "Every ship you see here violates at least 12 different council warfare treaties. Signed those treaties because we believe in peace, but we never stop preparing for war. Councilmember Huang Naon stared at a display showing something called a reality disruptor. What does that weapon actually do? She asked, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. It removes matter from existence, Dr. Bay replied simply. Not destroys it, not breaks it down, removes it entirely. The target simply stops existing. We built it because we realized that some enemies can't be reasoned with, can't be defeated through conventional means, and can't be allowed to continue existing. General Lim Seogain, who had seen more battles than anyone else in the room, looked pale as he studied the weapon specifications. The energy requirements for something like this ... How do you even power these ships? Director Shin walked back to his seat. We learned to harness energies that most species consider too dangerous to touch. Black hole reactors, quantum fusion cores, even controlled antimatter reactions. When you're fighting for the survival of your entire species, you use every tool available. Another display activated, showing AI systems with capabilities that made the Council's best computers look like simple calculators. These are our ship AIs, Dr. Bay continued. They're programmed to make tactical decisions that no organic mind could handle. When facing an existential threat, they can authorize the use of weapons that would traumatize any living crew member. They can calculate acceptable losses, plan planetary evacuations, and execute strategies that require sacrificing millions to save billions. The room fell silent as the council delegates tried to process what they were seeing. These weren't just weapons. They were tools designed to fight wars where the only acceptable outcome was the complete elimination of the enemy. Now you understand why other species fear us, Director Shin said softly. It's not because we're aggressive or violent by nature. It's because we're willing to do whatever it takes to survive, even if it means becoming monsters in the process. Ambassador Kung Jisoo looked around the room at the displays of humanity's darkest capabilities. Are you willing to deploy these ships against the architect machines? Director Shin's expression became even more serious. The question isn't whether we're willing. The question is whether you're prepared to live in a galaxy where you've seen what we're truly capable of when we stop holding back. Admiral Ru Minho stood on the bridge of the UES terminus, watching through the massive viewport as humanity's most secret fleet emerged from hidden shipyards scattered throughout the solar system. For 50 years, these shipyards had been concealed behind fake asteroid fields and camouflaged space stations. Now, as ship after ship materialized from their hiding places, the true scope of humanity's preparation became clear. The vessels emerging into space looked nothing like the peaceful exploration ships that most galactic species were familiar with. These were warships built for a single purpose: to fight enemies that couldn't be reasoned with, negotiated with, or defeated through conventional means. It's incredible, whispered Navigator Kim Tae-yoon, staring at the growing fleet. I've been in the Earth Defense Force for 20 years, and I never knew we had this many ships. Admiral Ru nodded grimly. Oh, most people didn't. These ships were built in complete secrecy, crewed by volunteers who signed agreements never to speak about their existence. Every person on every one of these vessels volunteered, knowing they might never come home. The UES Devastation slid into formation nearby, its hull bristling with weapons that violated every galactic warfare treaty. Captain Lee Seojin's voice crackled over the communication system. Terminus, this is Devastation. My crew is ready. We've been training for this day for 15 years. More ships continued to appear. The UES Nemesis, with weapon systems that could crack moons in half. The UES Apocalypse, carrying AI systems programmed to make decisions no human mind could bear. The US Retribution, smaller, but equipped with reality-warping technology that could erase matter from existence. Communications. Officer Song Jian turned from her station, her face pale but determined. Admiral, all ships are reporting ready status. We have 47 vessels in total, each one crewed by volunteers who understand what we're facing. Admiral Ru activated the fleet-wide communication system. His voice would reach every ship. Every crew member who had chosen to risk everything for the survival of galactic civilization. This is Admiral Ru to all ships, he began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. For 50 years, humanity has prepared for this moment. We always knew that someday we might face an enemy that couldn't be stopped through diplomacy or conventional warfare. On the destroyer U.S. Retribution, Captain Park Woo-jin gathered his crew in the main briefing room. These weren't regular soldiers. They were specialists who had trained their entire careers for battles that everyone hoped would never happen. "I want everyone to understand what we're heading into," Captain Park said, looking at each face in the room. "The architect machines don't negotiate. They don't take prisoners. They don't feel fear or mercy or doubt. Their only goal is to eliminate every living thing in the galaxy and rebuild it according to their own design." Engineer Choi Myeon raised her hand. "Captain, what about the Council's rules of engagement? What about the treaties we signed?" Captain Park's expression grew hard. "Those treaties were written for wars between civilized species. The architects aren't trying to conquer territory or gain resources. They want to commit genocide on a galactic scale. Against an enemy like that, there are no rules except survival." Back on the terminus, Admiral Rue continued his address to the fleet. "Each ship in this fleet carries weapons that most species consider too dangerous to exist. We built them because we learned long ago that sometimes being civilized means being prepared to do uncivilized things to protect innocent life." The massive flagship's engines began to glow as the quantum reactors powered up. Around them, the rest of the fleet prepared for the jump to hyperspace. "We're not just fighting for humanity today," the Admiral said. "We're fighting for every species in the galaxy that has never had to face their own extinction. We're fighting for children who should never have to see what war really looks like. We're fighting to make sure that when this is over, civilization can continue to exist." Song Gyeon checked her instruments one final time. "Admiral, all ships report ready for hyperspace jump. Destination coordinates are locked in." Admiral Rue took one last look at Earth through the viewport, knowing that some of the people on this fleet would never see their home again. "Operation Cleansing Fire is authorized," he said quietly. "All ships jump." The fleet disappeared into hyperspace, carrying humanity's darkest weapons toward a battle that would determine the fate of every living being in the galaxy. The Vega system had once been home to 3 beautiful planets with thriving colonies. Now, as Admiral Rue Minho's fleet dropped out of hyperspace, all they could see was a nightmare of twisted metal and silver machines. The architects had been busy during the weeks since they'd conquered this system, turning entire worlds into massive factories that churned out more of their kind. "My God," whispered Tactical Officer Kim Gi-won from her station on the UES terminus. "They've turned the entire third planet into one giant machine. It's like they're eating the planet itself and using it to build more ships." Admiral Rue stared at the tactical display showing thousands of architect vessels moving in perfect formation around their manufacturing facilities. Each ship was different from the others, constantly modifying and improving its design as it learned from its surroundings. "All ships, this is the Admiral," he announced over the fleet communication system. "Remember, these machines adapt to everything they encounter. We need to hit them hard and fast with everything we have before they figure out how to counter our weapons." Commander Lee Hun-jin stood on the bridge of the UES Devastation, watching as his weapons officers prepared humanity's most devastating arsenal. "Deploy quantum mines across the entire combat zone," he ordered. "Full spread, overlapping fields. Oh, I want those machines to learn what it feels like when space itself becomes their enemy." The mines shot out from the human ships like deadly seeds, spreading across millions of kilometers of space. When they activated, reality itself seemed to bend and twist around them. Space began to crack like broken glass, creating tears that pulled architect ships into dimensional voids. Pilot Yang Soo-young sat in the cockpit of her fighter, watching through her canopy as the first wave of quantum mines found their targets. "This is incredible," she reported over the communication system. "The mines are actually tearing holes in space. I can see architect ships just disappearing into nothing." But even as hundreds of architect vessels were destroyed in the first few minutes, Yang Soo-young noticed something troubling. The surviving machines were scanning the dimensional tiers, studying how the quantum mines worked. "Admiral, they're adapting already," she called out. "The newer architect ships are modifying their hulls. They're becoming resistant to the quantum field disruptions. On the UES Retribution, Captain Park Woo-jin watched his tactical display as the battle evolved in real time. Weapons Officer Jung Hae-woo switched to reality disruptors. Target their manufacturing facilities. Sir, are you sure? Jung Hae-woo asked, his hand hovering over the firing controls. The reality disruptors will erase everything in their path. There's no way to control the damage once we fire them. Captain Park's jaw tightened. Those factories are producing thousands of new machines every hour. We have to stop them now, no matter the cost. The reality disruptor beam shot out from the Retribution, and everything it touched simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not broken apart, it just stopped existing entirely. A massive architect factory that had been the size of a moon was there one moment and gone the next. Direct hit, reported Jung Hae-woo, his voice shaking slightly. The entire facility has been ... removed. But the architects were learning from this attack too. Young Soo-young watched from her fighter as the remaining machines began to spread out, making themselves harder targets. Worse, they started to replicate the energy signatures from human weapons. They're copying our technology, she warned. I'm seeing architect ships with weapons that look just like our plasma cannons, but somehow they've made them more powerful. The battle raged for 3 hours, with both sides constantly adapting to each other's tactics. Humanity's advantage was their willingness to use weapons that most civilized species would consider too cruel to deploy. The architects' advantage was their ability to learn and improve from every attack. We're losing ships faster than expected, reported Communications Officer Song Ji-yeon from the terminus. The EU's vindication was destroyed when the architects turned our own quantum technology against us. The EU's justice is heavily damaged and requesting permission to retreat. Admiral Rue studied the battle reports flowing across his screen. They were winning, but the cost was enormous. Every ship they lost represented hundreds of human lives, volunteers who had known they might not return home. All ships, prepare for final assault, he ordered. Target the Central Command facility. We end this now, before they can spread what they've learned to other systems. The remaining human ships converged on the massive Architect Command Center, unleashing everything they had. The space around them lit up with weapons, fire that could crack planets and tear holes in reality itself. When the smoke cleared, the Architect presence in the Vega system had been eliminated. But Admiral Rue looked at his casualty reports and felt his heart sink. They had won the battle, but at a cost that would haunt him forever. Fleet Admiral Kim Min-jae stood alone on the bridge of the UES Apocalypse, staring at the tactical display. That showed the grim reality of their situation. After 6 months of fighting across 12 different star systems, the Architect machines had adapted to every weapon humanity possessed. What had started as devastating attacks that could destroy entire fleets now barely scratched the enemy's improved hulls. Admiral, we're receiving reports from all fronts, said his aide, Lieutenant Commander Park Soyeon, her voice heavy with exhaustion. The Kepler offensive failed. The Centauri fleet is down to 30% strength, and the machines have started producing ships faster than we can destroy them. Kim Min-jae closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of every decision that had brought them to this point. When the war began, humanity had thought their secret weapons would be enough. They had weapons that could tear holes in space, AI systems that could make impossible tactical decisions, and ships built for total destruction. But the architects learned from everything, and now they were using humanity's own technology against them, only better. How long before they reached the populated systems? He asked quietly. At their current expansion rate, they'll reach Earth in 3 weeks, Park Soyeon replied. The outer colonies have maybe 10 days. The Admiral opened his eyes and looked around the bridge at his crew. These people had followed him through battles that had redefined what warfare meant. They had watched entire worlds disappear and had kept fighting even when victory seemed impossible. Signal all dreadnought commanders, he said, his voice steady, despite what he was about to order. Prepare for fleet-wide transmission. Authorization code, Omega 77. Park Soyeon's face went pale. She knew what that code meant. Sir, are you certain? Once we initiate Samson Protocol, There's no going back? Kim Min-jae nodded slowly. Patch me through to all ships. Across the battlefield, every human vessel received the emergency transmission. On the bridge of the UES Nemesis, Captain Chen Yujin had been expecting this moment for weeks. She had volunteered for this mission knowing that it might end this way. All Dreadnought commanders, this is Archangel Command. Fleet Admiral Kim Min-jae's voice echoed through every ship in the fleet.
What?
We have reached the point where conventional tactics are no longer sufficient. The enemy has adapted to everything we can throw at them, but they haven't adapted to this. Captain Chen Yujin turned to face her crew. These were some of the best people she had ever served with, and now she had to ask them to make the ultimate sacrifice. Initiate Samson Protocol, the Admiral continued. All Dreadnought-class vessels are to configure for maximum velocity ramming attacks. Full payload delivery directly into Architect production facilities. This is not a retreat. This is our final offensive. The bridge of the Nemesis fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. Samson Protocol was humanity's last resort, turning their most powerful warships into guided weapons, using the ships themselves as delivery systems for reality-breaking ordnance. Captain, said Engineer Oja Yan quietly, the quantum breach charges are ready. If we detonate them inside their main facility, the explosion will tear a hole in space itself. Nothing within a light-year radius will survive. Captain? Chen Yujin stood up and looked at each member of her crew one by one. I want everyone to know that serving with you has been the greatest honor of my life, she said, her voice calm and clear. What we're about to do will save billions of lives across the galaxy. Our families, our friends, everyone who has never had to see what we've seen, they'll live because of what we do today. Navigation Officer Yuan-Gio spoke up from her station. Captain, we have a clear trajectory to the primary construction facility, at maximum velocity impact in 7 minutes. Engineering, prepare for quantum breach, Captain Chen ordered. Set the charges for maximum yield. We're not just destroying that facility, we're making sure they can never rebuild it. Across the battlefield, 12 other Dreadnought ships were making the same preparations. Each vessel represented humanity's most advanced technology and centuries of combined experience from their crews. Now they were all preparing to become weapons of unimaginable destruction. All ships report ready, came Fleet Admiral Kim Min-jae's voice over the communication system. Remember, we're not just fighting for humanity today. We're fighting for every species that has the right to exist in this galaxy. Ramming speed. May God have mercy on our souls. The massive ships began to accelerate toward their targets, carrying enough destructive power to reshape solar systems and the determination to use it. Without hesitation, 3 months had passed. Since the last Architect machine was finally destroyed and the surviving human ships were finally coming home, Admiral Rumen Ho stood on the observation deck of the UES terminus, watching Earth grow larger through the viewport. The planet looked exactly the same as when they had left. But everything else had changed forever. The fleet returning home was a shadow of what had departed. Of the 47 ships that had begun Operation Cleansing Fire, only 18 were limping back to Earth. Some were held together by emergency repairs and sheer determination. Others were missing entire sections of their hulls, patched with whatever materials the crews could find. Admiral, we're receiving communication from Earth Defense Command, reported Communications Officer Song Jian. Her voice was different now, aged by the things she had seen during the war. They're requesting a full debrief for the Galactic Council. Admiral Ru nodded slowly. He had been dreading this moment for weeks. How do you explain to a galaxy full of peaceful species what humanity had been forced to become?
How do you describe
The weapons they had used and the decisions they had made. The council chamber on Earth was packed with representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy. They had all come to hear the official report on humanity's war against the Architects. But as Admiral Ru walked to the speaking platform, he could see the fear in their eyes. They were afraid of what they might learn about their human allies. The Architect threat has been completely eliminated, he began, his voice steady despite the weight of what he had to report. Every machine, every facility, every trace of their technology has been destroyed. The galaxy is safe from their influence. A murmur of relief spread through the chamber, but Admiral Ru held up his hand for silence. However, The cost of this victory was higher than anyone anticipated, he continued. We lost 60% of our ships and crews during the campaign. That's over 15,000 human lives, volunteers who knew they might not come home but went anyway because the alternative was the extinction of all galactic civilization. The chamber fell silent. These were numbers that most species couldn't comprehend. In their civilized wars, losing even a few hundred soldiers was considered a tragedy. Council member Wang Naiyong from Centauri Prime stood up slowly. Admiral, we've received some reports about the weapons your fleet used. Reports about reality-destroying devices and ships that were turned into guided weapons. Is this accurate? Admiral Ru's expression grew heavy. Yes. When conventional warfare proved insufficient, we escalated to weapons that most civilizations would consider too dangerous to exist. We used devices that could erase matter from existence, tear holes in space itself, and destroy entire solar systems. He paused, looking around the chamber at the shocked faces of the council representatives. And when even those weapons weren't enough, we initiated protocols that turned our most powerful ships into guided weapons. Crews volunteered to pilot their vessels directly into architect facilities, knowing they would not survive the impact. Silence in the chamber was deafening. Several council members looked physically sick as they tried to process what they were hearing. Meanwhile, the Human Defense Command headquarters, Director Shin Jungkook stood before a massive black wall, covered in names. Each name belonged to someone who had died during the war against the architects. The memorial stretched for hundreds of meters, containing the names of every human who had sacrificed their life to save the galaxy. He stopped in front of one particular section where the names of the dreadnought crews were etched in stone. Captain Chen Yujin of the UES Nemesis, Commander Li Hunjin of the UES Devastation, Captain Park Woojin of the UES Retribution. These were the people who had piloted humanity's most powerful ships directly into enemy facilities. Knowing they would die in the process, they saved everyone, he whispered to himself. But who's going to save us from what we had to become? In the council chamber, Ambassador Kong Jisoo asked the question that everyone was thinking. Admiral, now that the galaxy has seen what humanity is capable of when pushed to extremes, how do we move forward? How do we maintain peaceful relations knowing what you're willing to do? Admiral Ru was quiet for a long moment before answering. You asked us to save the galaxy, and we did. But we want you to understand something important. We didn't become monsters because we wanted to. We became monsters so that you wouldn't have to. He looked around the chamber one final time. Every civilization here can continue to believe in diplomacy, in peaceful solutions, in the goodness of sentient life. You can raise your children to think that the universe is a safe place where problems can be solved through conversation and compromise. And you can do that because humanity is willing to be the species that does the terrible things when terrible things need to be done. The council members left Earth that day with a new understanding of their place in the galaxy and a new appreciation for the species that had chosen to bear the burden of protecting everyone else.